Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Past, Present, and Future of Specifications webinar. I'm your host, Greg Jackman, the Specification Program Specialist here at Watts. Today's webinar is the next installment in our series of webinars geared specifically for you guys, our engineer, architect, and specifier customers. Given today's circumstances with the pandemic and everything, we know that most of you guys are probably working from home right now. So we're hoping that today's topic is very timely in the sense that you'll be able to focus on working on your specifications, and after this webinar, you'll be able to use our digital tools and be more familiar with them to just overall make your job easier as well. Rebecca, can you click to the next slide? So just to give you a little background on our webinar series, we hold several webinars throughout the year that cover a variety of topics. Our presenters are our in-house technology and product experts. And thanks to our partnership with the American Society of Plumbing Engineers, ASPE, we're able to provide you with the .1 continuing education unit credit if you stick around for the entire webinar. Next slide. So after today's webinar, our next one will be our corrosive waste drainage systems for plenum spaces webinar. That'll happen on May 28th. We'll be talking about code requirements for plenum spaces, and you'll learn how what to look for when identifying and selecting plenum piping systems for use with corrosive waste. So if you're interested in registering, I just sent a link to the registration page in the chat box here. You'll also be receiving an email invite to this webinar. If you haven't already, you'll see that in your inbox soon. Next slide. So with all that being said, today's webinar is a little bit different in the sense that we'll be presenting to you through our partnership with Allied Technical Solutions, or ATS. Our presenters from ATS are Rebecca Perullo, Director of Customer Experience, and Zach Allison, our National Account Manager. Rebecca works with specifiers and manufacturers to, connect specifiers' needs with products available in the market. Over the past 12 years, she's connected with stakeholders in the construction industry, which has given her a very strong understanding of the importance of specifications. And with 10 years of working with 10 years of working experience with mechanical engineers, Zach's goal is to help you solve issues with your projects and save time on the job site. His strong understanding of product application and building code has made his support vital to engineering firms all across North America. And finally, just myself, Greg Jackman, the Specification Program Specialist here at Watts. I oversee the development, execution, and measurement of Watts' specification programs designed to support you guys, our engineer and design community. Next slide. Quick housekeeping item. You're all probably familiar with WebEx, but just during the duration of today's presentation, your phone lines will be muted, but we encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation via the chat window. Just hover over the chat icon at the bottom of the WebEx and type in your question there. We'll be addressing these questions during and after the presentation. So that said, let me pass it off to Rebecca to get started.
Thank you, Greg, for that introduction. And thank you for everybody who's on the call this morning, especially our West Coast folks, that it might be a little early for you. Over the next half an hour, Zach and I want to take you through understanding and identifying the complexities and challenges behind writing specifications and identifying some issues that are faced by not only the specifiers, but the construction community who's trying to make your vision come into reality. So we'll go through some information like the purpose of a specification, identify some problems that we've found in the market. Zach will take you through the history and the evolution of the specification process. We're going to share some tips with you that we've seen with our customers and with other engineers, go through some sample specifications, reiterate why it's so important to hold a spec after all the long work that you've done with that, and then how Greg will take you through Watts and ATS can help you through this process. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll understand the challenges in interpreting specifications in the field, how the specification process has changed over the years, and how you can leverage technology to overcome some of these challenges. So just getting right into it, purpose of a specification. If you Google what is the purpose of a specification, it'll tell you to lay out building requirements in a clear and concise format to serve as a contract between the architect, building owner, the general contractors, and the subcontractors. The contract part is so important because this is essentially saying, this is what we want in the building. This is how we want the building to function. This is how we want the systems to be installed. And it doesn't matter the type of specification that you use. The contract has to be clear enough regardless of the format. We've done some research, and the most popular way most engineers are writing their specifications is with one name and an alternative. So that's where you've identified the manufacturer and a specific model number, and identify other manufacturers that you would like or accept equivalents from. The second most popular is base bid specifications with savings. So the idea where you'll only outline one manufacturer, but you'll accept any alternatives as long as it meets some of the same design criteria and provides a saving. And the last most common is where you actually identify not just one manufacturer with a model number, but 3 manufacturers with a specific model number. But regardless of the type of specification that you write, some of the challenges are still the same. Some specifications tend to be too brief and not enough details on your design or your design intent. Some tend to have too many abbreviations, which can lead to a lot of can be left to open interpretation. And some have too much jargon. So instead of being too brief, they might be too long. We also understand that a lot of times these things happen because we're all under tight deadlines, and there's sometimes not enough time to fully develop your plumbing specification as you would like. Also, the challenge with out-of-date libraries, even online, some information that might exist online, you might have an old cut sheet, you might have an old specification, and not all points of data are the same. And not identifying all of the features of the product can lead to challenges of the wrong alternative products being provided and being accepted. And last, because we do have a lot of loyalty to different vendors, sometimes the specification is too specific to one manufacturer and can lead to some confusion. I'm going to throw it over to Zach to talk about the evolution of the spec process.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. So kind of from our perspective, it really all started back in the 60s and 70s, and really long before that, but the evolution started around the 60s, 70s. And you see it started with this, giant stacks of paper on the right there. These are copied over from manuals, actually by hand back then. Back before the photocopier with actual cutting and pasting, really kind of a lost start when we think back to it. But engineers would manually copy that information from a manufacturer's manual into the written spec, and then hand draw the information on the drawings, which is actually some of my favorite meetings and calls to engineers when you drop into their office, and this is true all across America, where you eventually come across that wily vet and get schooled a bit on the history and where things come from over the years. They still have their old drafting table. They show you how to use their scale rulers and the special red pens. But back in this day, you would have teams within a firm dedicated to manually writing that complete spec, as well as a large office library whose focus is on ensuring the firm has all the information they need. These days, we're seeing the library space is consistently being reduced in offices all across America. And we can still kind of learn a lot from those wily vets. I mean, they're able to take information from a manual like you see here one of these old Watts manuals that we found a photo of, and actually build effective plumbing designs out of it. It's kind of funny to compare that to where we've come now with, the 3D models and the online tools that have all the information embedded within the parameters from only 50 years ago, gleaning the information that they could off of this. And that change to improved technological flow really started to swing in the late 80s, early 90s, and it all started with the floppy disk. The industry started to move away from those paper manuals to new and improved options. As funny as it is to look back on the floppy disk as improved technology, it led to really saw the delivery of information change as resources for information and technology started to improve. Actually, the first version of ATS spec tool was created on a CD-ROM, and we would need a digital update, which really means a replacement every year. Just like a manual, as soon as those floppy disks or CD-ROMs were printed, they're also out of date. These disk and USB drives still to this day have a similar issue. As soon as they're delivered to the designer and engineer, they're often out of date. There still would be a spec department back then with hundreds of thousands a year taking information from all the manufacturer's CDs or floppy disks and writing that into the firm's Word spec file. And then,
sorry to interrupt. Yep. I just had a couple of questions come through now if we want to address them as we're speaking about the topic here. So one comment here, some government institutions have required specs that preclude any make and model info. So basically they become a de facto performance specs. How can these be written without being very verbose?
That's a great question. That really ties to that slide on the different types of specifications. And Rebecca, I know that's something we've looked at for kind of the new tools that we're coming out with, kind of performance-based specs that make it easy, right?
Yeah, performance-based specs still represent about 10% of the specifications that are out on the market. And you're right, the majority are government-based. And the reason that a lot of the federal governments and some municipal governments are looking for that is to allow for competition on products, which as long as it's a very strong performance type spec with all of the details of how you want that product to perform, look, function, can avoid some of the issues that we're going to explain moving forward.
Yeah, we'll cover that in a little bit more detail later on when we get to different types of examples.
Okay, another question that came in here. Is it legal to only spec one manufacturer due to special design and difficult to find an equal?
If my understanding is that if you have only if you have a performance spec that, the product is very unique, then you could call that with no equals. The legality of it, I'm not a legal expert, I guess. I could just say from my experience, I definitely have seen that happen with a very unique product. But for the most part, even if you're specifying a particular product, again, you want a strong product description in there so that even if you are accepting equals, you're accepting equals that have the same performance.
Excellent, thank you.
So then I guess from then to the 90s to now, the 90s to now really seems like the blink of an eye. Once the internet kind of shifted everything and information could be kept current, accuracy and access to information really increased. Importantly, we started to see a shift in the industry from manufacturers and the reps pushing information out to the engineer to engineers looking to request or pull information direct from a manufacturer's website. The organization and access of all this information has changed greatly over the years, as well as the format that the information is delivered in. It's not just a Word spec anymore. There's PDF, Excel, CAD, and then, of course, Word specs still all being required. Engineering firms, many of them, and of all different sizes, began switching away from that large, many-person specification department, which really solely focuses on writing specs, to designers and project managers editing and writing their own spec on a job-by-job basis. They might still utilize a company master file to get them started, but the expectation began that they and their team would organize their spec for their own project, with approvals and reviews, of course, from the principals or the seniors on the team. And of course, shortly after the switch to CAD, which I remember hearing stories of some of the engineers go through, less than a decade later, you start to see the push of technology moving us into even more detail. Firms have been learning how to integrate BIM and Revit technology into the project since the mid to late 2000s. It has allowed some firms improve accuracy in their designs and importantly, reduce time on site when done properly. Now, how to properly integrate is still being figured out in a sense. There's a number of firms across America that have really focused on integrating BIM into the design process, and they've seen some great results because of it. Others still just use it as a basic level, almost as a CAD 2D drawing, but with improved information in the parameters. But most importantly, the capabilities and efficiencies of designing in 3D or BIM have improved every year. And primarily, this allows improved communication between all the different stakeholders on the project. That's why it's so popular. From the architect to the engineer to the contractor and owner, and even the manufacturer's input, the ability to collaborate on a project file greatly reduce costly errors on site, and this has led to the increased usage every year. And we're finding this drive for improved efficiency, quicker answers, and most importantly, collaboration between all the decision makers has led to changes in how manufacturers are providing this information, not just in how they're providing Revit and building BIM files, but driving change in the tools that design professionals have access to use in their day-to-day build environments. So let's pass it back over to Rebecca to review some of the new tools, as well as some tips for getting a cleaner, more concise specification.
Thanks, Zach. So I'm going to go through 5 tips on how to write a clean specification. The first one is application. Understanding where the product is going to be used and how it's going to be used is very important, and making sure that that matches the intention and usage of the actual building. In the past, hands-free solution, for example, was always considered for healthcare or high traffic applications. I think after everything that we've gone through over the last 3 to 6 months, we're going to be changing hands-free solution to any building. But with that, we still need to consider the owner's budget, the project's budget, and what the manufacturer intended that product to be used for. The next thing we want you to consider is structure. So regardless if you're going to write that performance-based spec or a proprietary spec or a specifications with 3 names and 3 model numbers, include everything that needs to go into that installation. So don't just think about the basin and the faucet. Include your P-trap, include your carrier. Missing on some of those pieces or assuming your contractor is going to know that that's what you wanted in your specification can lead to problems on the job site. Next is code, specifically in the U.S. where you deal with national codes, state codes, county codes, and sometimes city codes. You need to be really specific about where the project is going and take a look at all of the codes that can potentially, again, drive issues when it comes to installation and getting that approval for occupancy. And like I think that one engineer mentioned, there are also, depending on what government, if you're working with a government agency on a building, you may also need to look at what they require in terms of specifications and requirements for buildings. The next tip is to be precise. You can be precise, but not include a lot of jargon. In this example that we took from a specification, I'm going to read it to you, and it's long and drawn out. Drawing plans and details indicate general location and arrangement of underground storm and drainage piping system location and arrangement of storage water systems is critical, and design consideration should be taken into account. Install storm water systems as indicated herein and as directed by product manufacturer to maximum extent practical. Where a specific installation procedure is not indicated, follow product manufacturer's written instructions. What could have been written is install in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. It's clear, to the point, and it lets the contractor know that they should be looking at the installation instructions from the manufacturer. Be detailed, provide full product descriptions. In the specification that was originally written, there were so many different possible trench drains that could have been included in the project. A cement drain, trench drain with a cast iron cover, a full cast iron drain, when really what the intention for, and based off of the application, was that the engineer wanted a stainless steel drain that had specific requirements so individuals could walk on top of it and not slip. Also, specify with alternatives. We know, and just like somebody had mentioned on the call in one of the questions, there probably will be an alternative for the product, but allow that decision on what an acceptable alternative is to be made by you as the engineer. You understand the intent that you had for the building and the intent that you have for your system. Taking the extra few minutes to determine what all the competitive models are will eliminate confusion and eliminate wrong interpretations of your design. And if you're going to use Revit, we also recommend that you keep what we call the I in BIM. Having all the parameters and all the information about that product. Don't use generic models. That you lose the power of going into 3D design if you use just the generic models. Make sure that there's dimensions. Make sure there's working proper working connections. Now, with a lot of the new Revit files that are coming out, they're smaller in size. I know in the past, the challenge was the file sizes were too big, so people were switching to generic models because the generic models were just lightweight. Now with the files that are being created today, you can still have the important parameters that are needed for Revit and that small file size. So we're going to walk through a sample specification and really focus on kind of those same tips that we talked about. So I want to say this example is just from a few years ago at the Oregon Hospital and Science University, or OHSU, a hospital in Portland, Oregon that was having some issues with temperature creep. This certain area in the hospital didn't have the same occupancy 24/7, so there was temperature creep overnight. And every morning, the maintenance staff had to go in and balance the mixing valves. You can imagine if somebody missed doing that, there could be an instance of scalding or even potentially the growth of Legionella in these faucets if, for whatever reason, that maintenance staff, someone was sick or something else catastrophic happened in the hospital. Someone would forget to do this, and you could put patients' life at risk. They had tried a lot of different mixing valves, and what they realized is that they needed something that would essentially auto-adjust on its own. So a mixing valve that would make sure that the temperature doesn't creep within 2 degrees Fahrenheit above or below what the ASSE 1017 standard requires. They wanted temperature sensors both on the hot and cold inlets, again, to make sure that there would be less of a chance of temperature creep. So by being precise, you can put in all of the details of the system that you want. And really what it was to make sure that the system, the mixing valve, had a control water temperature and with a plus or 2 minus degree variance in accordance with ASSE 10 standard. And could also be, the user could also set and control high temperature sanitation mode. So putting the key features that you need of the product. And if, again, you're working with a government agency which won't allow manufacturer information, you don't have to put it, but you can put at the bottom exactly the unit that you researched and you feel is the right fit and for your design intent. Also, by putting the entire building and designing the entire building in Revit, you can not just focus on that one product, on that one mixing valve, but in this instance, the whole delivery system of hot water. So the hot water tank filtration, everything that would be required for that hospital where patient safety is of utmost importance. And that leads to the last part, which is why holding a specification is so important. This is about making, the engineer you've done all this work, you've done the research, you've done the sizing, you've done the modeling, you've done all this work. We want to make sure that you are in charge of the design and the specification, not the contractor, not the owner. You've already gotten the owner's approval for this building. You already have the right costings and your project is on budget. Let's make sure that nothing is detracted from your design because it's been left to interpretation, because the wrong alternatives were provided and then approved. We want to make sure that you as the engineer hold your spec because you've done all this work. You are the you are the expert on this project and what is required for it. Cost savings, opening up for cost savings is an opportunity, but it can be very dangerous, and we just want to make sure that your design intent does not get lost.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rebecca. So right now, I just wanted to take a few minutes and just really briefly show you how Watts can help you with your specifications through the use of our digital tools. So Rebecca, can you advance it to the next slide? So if you go to watts.com and click resources in the nav bar, click engineers, you'll find what you're looking at right now. This is our digital tools for engineers page. So that's watts.com/resources/engineer tools. So here you'll find our top 5 digital tools for engineers, the WattsWorks online portal. We have Spec Hub, which is our new project specification tool. Selexit, our online product configurator. Our new Watts spec service. And the 5th tool is just the watts.com website itself. So I'm just going to send you a link. Oh, sorry, Rebecca, can you go back to the previous slide? Just going to stay on this for a minute. So I just wanted to briefly go over Spec Hub first. I sent you a link to its landing page on watts.com. So Spec Hub is our brand new project specification tool. We officially launched it in March. So with this tool, you're able to create project specs that'll help you specify and select Watts products, create submittal packages and plumbing schedules, and easily share project information with your colleagues. One of the most significant benefits of Spec Hub is its speed. So it gives you the ability to quickly select and specify Watts products according to building requirements and code. It also is going to save you time researching products, as it has access to all the product info and data that you need in there. You also save time writing specs, plumbing schedules, and gathering BIM files. Then after you're done putting together your project or spec, the tool will automatically generate the docs for you, and you can download them and share them with your colleagues easily. We also have our Selexit tool, which is our online product configurator. I also sent a link in the chat box to its webpage to sign up. So this tool simplifies the configuration and ordering process for your customers within 3 product lines. So that's snow melting, mixing valves, and ACVs. Some of the key benefits of the tool include designing your systems faster, creating and sharing your projects easily, and quickly assembling your specs and preparing 2D and 3D downloads. We also have our WattsWorks online program where you can bolster your skills and educate yourself on different Watts products and solutions at your own pace from anywhere in the world on any device. It's on demand. We have over 250 e-learning courses in there right now. Each take under 10 minutes to complete. Through our Learn and Earn program, you can earn tokens that you can trade in for different lifestyle items. And also in this portal, you can find the recordings of this webinar series. So in case you missed one, you can go in and watch it on demand, take the quiz, and still earn that 0.1 SBC credit. And finally, our new Watts spec service. So if you're looking to get your master specifications updated, we'll update them for you. You just need to contact your local Watts rep, or you yourself can send in your project requirements to spechub@wattswater.com, and we'll take care of the rest. So when we're done, you'll then receive the customized project specs in your inbox when complete. Rebecca, can you click to the next slide? So just circling back now to the 3 main objectives that we say at the beginning of this webinar. We hope you now have a better understanding of how technology has changed the process of developing and managing specifications, a better understanding of the challenges in interpreting specifications in the field, and we hope you've learned more techniques to leverage technology to overcome challenges faced in the field as well. So with that said, we do have a few chat questions in here that I can read off. So one question here, do you have Revit Models blocks for all your products, and what is the best way to get them? So we host all of our Revit and BIM files on BIM Object. If you go to watts.com, the planning page for engineers, I believe it's watts.com/planning, but I'll get to that in a second. You can find the link to BIM Object there with all of our BIM files. I have a question here. Are HFS product specs available also?
Sorry, can you say that one again?
Are HFS product specs available also? I think they're referring to what's in Spec Hub, maybe. I'm not sure what HFS stands for.
Yeah, if the person who asked that question can type that out. I'm just not familiar with the acronym.
Okay, yeah.
Off the top of my head right now.
All right, I'll go back to that one in a second if you want to follow up with another comment there. So we have more of a comment here. In cases where the makes and models are allowed, we had a section concerning equivalents that aren't in the specs, where the onus is on the contractor to demonstrate that said equivalent is equal in quality and performance with the advantages outlined, such as shorter delivery, reduced costs. The engineer reserves the right to either accept or reject the equivalent. Oh, and we have clarification on the acronym. It's HF Scientific. So going back to that comment, the question was, are HF Scientific product specs available also? I would have to look in there. We should have some BIM files for that brand, but I'll check that and confirm with you. Those are all the chat
Okay.
questions that came in. I'm going to give you guys
And
just
could you just read that last one again?
the comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in cases where the makes and models are allowed, we had a section concerning equivalents that aren't in the specs, where the onus is on the contractor to demonstrate that said equivalent is equal to or is equal in quality and performance with the advantages outlined, such as shorter delivery, reduced costs, etc. The engineer reserves the right to either accept or reject the equivalent.
Yeah, that's perfect. That is really an ideal way to go about it, where you've listed out your three that you deem equal and matching the performance that you're looking for in your project. Then absolutely, there are potential cost savings. The key is making sure that the reason for the switch is explained to the owner, and the savings are provided back to the owner, and that they understand, sure, that you can get, this level of performance for, for round number's sake, $100. But if we go down to $70, or we can reduce our lead time by going down to this, quote unquote lower quality, or we'll just say differently functioning product. As long as the owner's being given the appropriate information, and you as the engineers are being given the opportunity to make that decision, having a strong, clear specification gives you that opportunity.
Any other questions?
Great. Yeah, just referring back to that question around the Revit models and blocks, I just sent a link to BIM object in the chat window here, where we have all of our BIM files. Also a link to the planning page for engineers on watts.com, where you can find this BIM object link along with all the other engineering tools as well.
Well, as well as one of your outputs on Spec Hub, right? One of the nice things about that is that, whether if you're using Spec Hub or your spec service, you can kind of get a customized file where it could be, really customized to the level of detail that the engineer requires. A lot of the BIM object stuff, and not just Watts, but just in general, is more a type of format that fits the vast variety of engineers. But by selecting your individual product and reaching out to the team, if you need your level of detail created a specific way, sending that into the spec service that you have online will customize it to the level of detail that they require.
Excellent. Are there any other questions out there? Those are all the ones that we had come through in the chat. Just give it a few more seconds here. Here's one. Apart from the engineer, is there anyone else invoiced in a bid project who might authorize less expensive alternatives to items on a given quote?
Well, I think it would always come back to the engineer. The contractor would submit it back to the engineer and the architect. But the architect and engineer are really dependent on who's covering which portion, are the ones making that decision on whether or not that's approved. There's certainly cases, in all types of different territories where not all engineers are focused on the detail, or they're allowing more, say, decision making by a contractor. And there are delivery methods that tie to that. Design build projects do have a lot of power to the contractor, and really, at that point, they're the ones writing the specification. But if you're writing the specification and it's your stamp on it, then you're the decision maker. And I think that's an important part to keep in mind. And it's one of the reasons that manufacturers spend so much time and money on making sure engineers are aware of the product and understand, not just how to use it, but why they're using a particular product. Understanding the key differences allows you to make educated decisions on what level of quality you allow and what level you don't.
Right. I think you answered just a point of clarification. The question was around in who is involved in a bid project, not who is invoiced. So I think you answered that. What are some tips on writing the warranty and training sections of a specification?
No, that's actually that's a really interesting, unique question. I haven't had that one very much lately, but it's a great question. There are a lot of details that could be included in the warranty section, especially if it's a manufacturer's warranty that really is, say, the deciding criteria for an owner in approving a project, or specifically asking for a particular product on site. Then you want to make sure that's detailed. As a general sense, I would think that's kind of following one of the examples that Rebecca gave earlier about the installation. Something as simple as install in accordance with manufacturer's recommendations. And often for a warranty or training section, manufacturer would be able to give you a fairly robust and detailed specific section that you can include there. And I know we've been working, and Rebecca, maybe you can speak more to this, on helping engineers with the kind of third part of the three-part spec.
I would agree that in the example given, you do want to relate it to a specific product. There has been instances where there's been a warranty requirement, I think it was 30 years, and there was no product out there that had that type of warranty. So the contractors were spending time, the manufacturers were spending time. So making that product selection, that initial one, using that for your warranty and installation makes the process a lot easier and ensures that there's an actual product out there that can be installed. And yes, currently our Spec Hub in the future will have the ability to have customized that part 3 of your 3-part specification, which would help outline those details based on the products.
Another comment that just came through, accepting submittal deviation during bid and after bid makes the difference. If you allow it bid, alternate needs to be available to all bidding contractors.
I think is a statement that's true.
Those are all the questions we have. Rebecca, if you want to just advance to the next slide. So once this webinar ends, it'll bring you to a page where you can choose to visit all these pages that you're seeing here that we discussed today. You can visit our Spec Hub page to register. You can visit our digital tools for engineering page, where you'll find all of our digital tools I spoke of earlier, like Selexit and Spec Hub. You also find a link to sign up for our next webinar on May 28th, and a link to the on-demand webinars page, where you can find all the recordings of past webinars that we've done in this series, take the quiz there, and still earn the Ask VCU credit. And one final slide here, just to close out. You can see all of our email addresses here. I just want to thank Rebecca and Zach and everyone who joined us today. Just to let you know, recording of this presentation and your CEU credit will be emailed to you. If you have any further questions, you can direct them to me at gregory.jackman@wattswater.com. And for more technical and topic related questions, you can reach out to Rebecca at atspec.com or Zach at ats.com, atspec.com as well. So once again, we hope that the timing of this webinar has been beneficial to you guys, and it'll give you the opportunity to experiment with our digital tools that we discussed today and just make your job overall easier. So, that said, everyone stay safe, good luck, and thank you again for joining.
Thanks for having us, Greg. Appreciate you setting this up.
Yes, thank you.